We want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. I'm Michelle Montero. I'm the founder of Michelle Montero Marketing, where I provide digital marketing services for women-owned online businesses such as coaches and virtual assistants. I decided to step forward and create this summit with the help of a team member, Betsy Castro, after having to reface my sexual assault when my rapist tried to sue me in October of 2020. Betsy and I work together in her mental health virtual agency, and we have grown a wonderful partnership and friendship where I felt comfortable enough to confide in her my experience. The lawsuit really caught me by surprise, especially since it was something that happened about 6 years ago. Suddenly, all the flashbacks I had stuffed into the deepest corner of my brain. All the flashbacks of removing myself from school to having news reporters showing up at my home where I thought I was safe came flooding back into my brain. As I was reading the summons, I felt my spirit shattering. When I read the words, Defendant Montero engaged in consensual intercourse with the plaintiffs and three other males one by one, I felt my stomach churn as I remembered the sheer fear and panic, as I remembered my body just completely shutting down that day. Consensual my ass. I was beginning to feel angry as I read that crap piece of paper telling me all these lies. I felt infuriated when I read, due to the false statements of Defendant Montero, the plaintiffs and their reputations have been damaged beyond recovery. And I have to laugh at that part. It was the part that really did it for me, and I started to research like crazy. I felt angry that they had the audacity to violate me sexually, that they had the audacity to make me remember everything they did. I had to leave school. I had to drop my dream of becoming a psychologist to help others heal their mental health. I felt angry that 6 years later, I'm still paranoid and still getting flashbacks, even when I'm just home with my fiance. And I felt angry that just because they violated me and hurt me, I would oftentimes cringe when my fiance would want to become intimate with me, let alone touch me. That the most loving relationship I had ever been in is constantly interrupted by a trauma that happened to me 6 years ago. I was infuriated that they had the audacity to come back 6 years ago and disturb my peace again, but I became motivated to make sure that I could defend myself so I can focus on my healing and continue to build the life that I've been trying to do so. I discovered resources that I had no idea were available to me as a victim of rape, and I found legal representation to help me. Luckily, the judge ruled to dismiss me from the case, a favorable action for me, but that experience made me realize how little informed I really was when I had to scramble to figure out how to defend myself, especially 6 years ago when I thought I couldn't even press charges because my family couldn't afford it. I knew that there are many other victims who also don't know about what resources are available to get them the help they need, let alone how to cope with the trauma of being violated sexually. I knew I didn't want to stop until I could tell everybody about it. That's when I realized my purpose in all of this was to share my experience and my newly found resources with other women, men, and families and communities. Thanks to Betsy's connections in the mental health industry, she helped me curate this event with panelists of experts that will help us become more educated and aware about rape culture and sexual assault. So Betsy, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle, for starting us off over here. And hi, everybody. My name is Betsy Castro, and I'm the founder of the Mental Health Virtual Agency, which works under Hello Betsy Ann. And we provide a variety of services from administrative work to digital marketing. And we specialize in providing these services to therapists and psychologists who are in private practice. Michelle's part of my team, and as part of my team, something that we always do is our monthly meets in which we talk about different things. And in one of those monthly meetings that we had, I don't even know how we started that conversation, but we both found out that we had something in common, which was that we were both rape survivors. And Michelle actually was the one that brought up the idea of creating this summit. And I was so quick to agree to this because our conversation actually brought me back to the day that I told my husband that I was a rape survivor. My husband was the typical person that engages in rape culture in the sense of victim blaming. And as I would hear him, using this to other victims of rape, I came forth and I told them what had happened to me and how it had happened to me. And once he heard my story, that was like an eye opening for him. He basically changed his ways, and that was a push that he needed to see that we do live in a rape culture, to see that he does engage in that. And that basically was the push for him to become a feminist, because he is now a feminist and an ally. But it took him to see a loved one get hurt to care about this. And it sucks that it has to. Most people do not engage in this topic unless somebody they know has been hurt or they've been hurt by themselves because of the rape culture that we live in. And to me, that just didn't seem fair, because if that hadn't happened to me, probably my husband would have never changed the way that he sees things, and he would probably still be engaging in victim blaming like many other people are. And it's everywhere. Like, it doesn't even matter where in the world you live, you see rape culture. Like here in the USA, we have a saying that says, boys will be boys, and that basically perpetuates rape culture. In Nicaragua, where I'm from, we have a saying that goes, amarren a su gallina, que mi gallo anda suelto, which that translate to basically put away your chicks because my rooster is out there and they're going to do whatever it wants to your chicken no matter what, and I'm not going to do anything about it. And they start using this saying when they have a boy that has turned into a teen and is starting to like women, and that's when they start using it. So it kind of like brought to my attention that, oh, I'm sorry, I see somebody say that the camera's off with the mics. That may be somebody's connection though. Sorry, I just saw that in the comments. Can you guys hear me fine though? Yeah, okay. So kind of like going back then to my story, I hope that everybody can hear me. Yeah, we do live in society that allows rape culture to be normalized and seen as that's just the way things are, and they shouldn't just be like that. Nobody deserves to get raped, no matter what you are wearing, no matter where you at. It's just nobody deserves that. So when Michelle brought this to the thing, I immediately agreed. So I started to reach out people, within my mental health network, and basically almost everybody that you see here today has either worked with me, we worked together, collaborated in other projects, and I'm just so honored that we're all here together today. Thank you so much, for dedicating your time today on a Saturday to talk about this heavy topic, because it's a very difficult topic and it's heavy. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be with all of you here together. And well, I will allow Michelle now to introduce our panelists over here.
Thank you, Betsy. So, ladies and gentlemen, our panelists of experts, we have Paola Andrea Rodriguez, who's a licensed mental health clinician, psychotherapist, and sex therapist of Life Discovery Psych; Gabriela Galvan Antillon, sex therapist and licensed hypnotherapist of Blue Pearl Therapeutic; Shaloma Lo Wagstafi, founder of Women of Color in Cannabis. And if each panelist can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Paula Rodriguez, as they said, and I am a psychotherapist and a sex therapist, and I'm so excited to be able to join you today. I think we need to have more conversations like these, and thank you guys for sharing your story. And I just want to give everybody a quick reminder that because this topic is going to be a little bit heavy, I invite everybody to breathe and to stay in your body. We're going to be talking about things that may be a little bit triggering for some, but just excited to be here. Thank you so much for opening up this space. We need more spaces like these. And yes, I have a private practice in the beautiful city of Miami called Life Discovery Psychotherapy. And you're free to contact me or follow me, but thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Paola.
Welcome.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gabriela Galvan de Antion. I am a licensed psychotherapist, a board-certified sex therapist, and a hypnotherapist here in South Florida. I'm in Coral Gables in private practice. And just like Paola, I do believe that this conversation needs to be happening a heck of a lot more than it does. And unfortunately, and I'm sure many of you have seen that the trend of this conversation tends to have more women involved in the conversation and really not a whole lot of young men or men in general. And that is definitely something that I would love to see change, because even though predominantly sexual assaults, rape, and things like that do happen to women, girls, things like that, it also happens to boys as well. You know, different statistically, but it's a message that regardless who the person is, whatever gender they are, what anything, it really needs to, we need to have more participation across the board in regards to ages, sex, orientation, all of that. But I really appreciate being invited, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Paola.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shaloma Wagstaff, but I go by Lo because it just makes my life easier and everyone else's life easier. I am the founder of Women of Color in Cannabis. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're based in Brooklyn, New York, but we do have, luckily supporters and volunteers that are nationwide. And I want to just thank Betsy and Michelle for inviting me to this summit. I met Betsy when my organization had our sexual harassment meeting that we called Me Too and Marijuana. As everyone mentioned, we see that rape culture is something prevalent in all of society. And even though cannabis is a newer industry and a burgeoning industry, that's no different. In fact, we're seeing a lot more instances of sexual harassment and rape culture in cannabis, but we don't have the structure or the infrastructure to support a lot of the victims and survivors. We don't have HR departments. We don't have sexual harassment training specific to cannabis. It is what some would consider a more lax environment. Yes, it is a professional environment, but there's this connotation of like things are okay and it's all a chill vibe, everyone, and let's all just be cool about it. And that can be a really damaging or harmful environment to create when you are pushing things like everyone being cool about everything, because some things aren't cool and we need to speak up about them. So I was very happy that I was invited to speak at this summit, because I think we have the opportunity in this new industry to kind of set the standard and to really be thoughtful as we begin to build out the cannabis industry, that we are creating systems that can support men and women alike from being preyed upon. Because we know when you're dealing with, and I don't like to call cannabis a drug, but I'll say an altering substance, that you are leaving yourself exposed, and that is no reason to be preyed upon. So I thought it was very important to kind of sit and join this talk and this message to let people know that even if you're not interested in cannabis, even if you're not in the world at all, you may know someone who is. And just like Betsy said, it may take you as that person or having that relationship with that person to really buy in and understand why we should all kind of keep our ears out to what's happening in the cannabis industry, not only socially, but legally as well, to make sure that we're creating the systems that can possibly support survivors. So once again, thank you, ladies. And I'm looking forward to, the continuous shares and to also share my story as well.
Thank you. Okay, it looks...
All right, Michelle, give me 1 second. I have Jaritza on the phone because I know she's trying to log in. So just give me a few seconds. But you can continue for now.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's see here. What else was on our agenda? Oh, right. So before we jump into our Q&A, I want to go over some key terms so that we can make sure we all speak the same language and make sure we all understand the terms we're using. And we will email these key terms to everybody so you can have the information. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just bear with me 1 moment. Can everybody see my screen? I'm going to take that as a yes. All right, so key terms to discuss today. The first key term that we should be discussing is rape culture. Rape culture is a sociological concept of normalizing rape due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality, an environment in which rape is frequent and in which sexual violence is normalized and excused in the media and popular culture. Rape is an unlawful sexual activity, usually sexual intercourse, against the will of the victim, through force or threat of force, or with a victim who is beneath a certain age or incapable of valid consent because of mental illness, mental deficiency, intoxication, unconsciousness, or deception. Rape was long considered to be caused by unbridled sexual desire, but it is now understood as a pathological assertion of power over a victim. Coercion. Coercion is to persuade someone to do something by using force or threats, to use intimidating behavior that puts a person in immediate fear of consequences in order to compel that person to act against his or her will. Sexual assault is sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent of the victim. Examples are attempted rape, fondling or unwanted sexual touching, forcing the victim to perform sexual acts such as oral sex or penetrating the perpetrator's body, penetration of the victim's body, or rape. Acquaintance sexual assault is non-consensual sexual intercourse between people who know each other. Sexual assault between acquaintances consists of non-consensual sexual activities that does not include intercourse. Consent. When you and your sexual partners both agree to have sex or engage in any type of sexual activity, consent can be revoked at any time. Sexual harassment. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassments of a sexual nature. I wanted to include all of these because I think these are important for us to know. So you can read them on your own time. I'm just going to scroll past these, but some of them are, for example, neck massages, touching employees, clothing, hair or body, hugging, kissing, patting, staring at someone, sexually suggestive signals, etc. Survivor and victim, they both have similar definitions. It's an individual who is going or has gone through the recovery process. Additionally, this is a word that is often used when discussing the short and long-term effects of sexual violence. Some people identify as a victim while others identify as a survivor. Victim blaming occurs when the victim of a crime or any wrongful act is held entirely or partially at fault for the harm that befell them. A simple example would be if someone had their laptop stolen when leaving it unattended at a coffee shop, and instead of holding the criminal responsible for stealing something that didn't belong to them, the blame is placed on the person who left their laptop unattended. Slut shaming, the action or fact of stigmatizing a woman for engaging in behavior judged to be promiscuous or sexually provocative. Slut shaming is the practice of criticizing people, especially women and girls, who are perceived to violate expectations of behavior and appearance regarding issues related to sexuality. And we'll cover these a little later. Okay. So now we'll...
Michelle, Jaritza's in, but she's logged in as Brian Noss. So if we can let her in.
Okay. Cool. All right, she should be here.
Hey, Jaritza. It's nice to finally
Hi.
be able to log you in over here.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you so much. So sorry, people, for the technical difficulties that we were having just now, but now we have Jaritza over here. She's also a business owner and a founder of the Sacred Soma, and she's also a rape survivor. So she's here to basically tell us her story and her journey into healing, to see that, you know, some people have gone through this and made something out of themselves, so you don't always have to be the victim. So go ahead, Jaritza, and introduce yourself. And
Thank you. I just want to thank you guys with all the technical difficulty for just bearing with me as I kept trying my best to be here because I wanted to really share my story. So my name is Yarixa, and I'm the owner of the Sacred Soma. And I founded the Sacred Soma for so many reasons. But one of the main reasons that led me here was my story and my journey. And a friend, Alona, actually shared this summit with me. And when I saw it, it was like a whole full body reaction of, I have to share my story here, because when it said rape culture, to me, it hit me in such a way that it was just a better understanding of what I had been through that had never been acknowledged. And so that's why I felt this like pull to share my story. So I was 17 and I was working in a restaurant, and I was a very sheltered child. My mother always kept me very sheltered and very close. And I never realized that she had had a history of rape as well. And that's why she was sheltering me for so many years. And I was working at a restaurant, and the owner closed that night, and he let everyone go and said, "You close the register and then we can go." And all the other waiters and everybody else working had left, and it was just me and him. And I was at the register, and he kind of came up behind me. And the reason I'm sharing this more than anything is because of what happened after. So it wasn't so much the fact that he came up behind me and he victimized me, but the fact that what haunted me for so many years was the fact that I didn't fight back. I didn't say, no, stop. I didn't run. I didn't try to hit him. I froze. And so when the event happened, it wasn't like most people say to you. And even years later, people are like, well, did you fight back? Well, why didn't you fight back? Well, why didn't you say anything? Well, why didn't you push him off? Well, why didn't you say no? And I think it's important for people to know that in that moment, you can either go into fight or flight, or you can freeze. And I was so terrified that I didn't know what to do. I froze. I literally froze. There was no words that could come out of my mouth. There was no movement. I literally felt paralyzed. And even as he pushed me against the table, I literally left my body. And in that moment, I didn't know I was doing that. But my head was like, if you fight this man, you're locked in a restaurant. It's dark. It's late. If you fight him, he's bigger. He's going to hurt you. And so I just paralyzed myself. I literally left my body. And still till this day, I can't remember what I remember leaving, but I can't even remember how I got home that night. It was like a moment of grace when the whole situation was happening, and all of a sudden there was a parking lot behind the restaurant, and it was a long driveway to get to that parking lot. And all of a sudden, this car pulled into the driveway and all the way to the back of the restaurant to the parking lot, and turned around, and the lights of the car flashed into the restaurant and lit the restaurant up. And the car stopped there for a bit, and that was the moment when he stopped. I'm sure he was afraid. And it was the first moment where my body reacted, and I got up and ran out of that restaurant. And I went home. Like I said, I don't even remember the point of leaving that restaurant to getting home. That's how dissociated and disconnected I was from myself. And it was really like, I look back at it now, and it was really the wisest thing my body could do. It was trying to protect me. But when I got home and I saw my mother, I felt very inclined to say to her, something happened. And I did. I went up to her and I was crying, and she was like, what's wrong? I said, Mom, something happened. And it was like she automatically knew. And her response to me was, Mija, my daughter, this is just something that happens to women. Without me saying anything to her, she said, go take a shower. I'm sorry. She said, go take a shower and go to bed. You're going to be fine. And that's it. We never talked about it again. And then after that, let me just let my dog out here. After that, something inside me was like, something's not right here. This does not feel right. And I was a practicing Jehovah's Witness. I had been raised Jehovah's Witness. And so I went to what we call the elder. It was just like a pastor in my church. And I said to him, I said, hey, look, without telling him directly, it was me. I said, what would happen how could you help? And what would happen if a girl told you that, I have a friend that got raped and she doesn't know what to do? And his reply to me was, well, we'd have to see, what was she wearing? Was she wearing a short skirt? What was her outfit? And of course, that night I was wearing a short skirt. And then he said, well, we'd also have to look at the situation. Did she put herself in a situation where she was with a man by herself? And that was it for me. I had gone to another person to basically seek help. And in that moment where, again, I was turned down and made to feel like it was my fault, it sunk in that maybe I didn't fight. So maybe it was my fault. Maybe I did ask for it, because what was I doing in there late with another man? And I was wearing a skirt. And in that moment, that there was no one to guide me and say, hey, no, what they did to you was wrong. And so for years after that, I kind of just pushed it down and was like, I'm not going to, it's just, I guess it was just my fault. And it wasn't until a few years later that a friend of mine said, oh, do you remember that guy you used to work for? And my heart dropped. And she said, well, I got pulled into jury duty and I'm on a case of a girl that he raped. And it was the first time after that moment that I finally was able to open up and tell someone and be like, oh my God, this happened to me. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't something I did wrong. This happened to me too. And he was doing it to other people. But in the moment at that age, I couldn't, when I was 17 and I couldn't make sense of all of it. It just felt like everybody was saying, it's your fault. You put yourself there. You did this to yourself. And so eventually I was able to start doing some healing, and I started sharing, and I really just started sharing for myself and just talking my story. But I still hadn't realized that it wasn't something I deserved. And I still was moving through life feeling completely unsafe in my body. Like I would walk out and be like, okay, am I covered up enough? Like, am I staying invisible and staying out of sight? Because, this is just something men do. And I have to be cautious about the way I behave around men, because what if I'm the one who's calling this all in? And it was very subtle. It wasn't something that I was consciously doing. It was very unconscious, where I was just making myself small, avoiding certain men, avoiding certain situations, watching the way I dressed. And it was always in the back of my mind that I had to be very on alert. And then I found Julia Mick, who has been my teacher for the past few years and really helped me do a lot of healing, and has taught me the work that I share with other people. And when we started our healing process, she basically does something called somatic experiencing, where she actually brings you into your body. And this is where I learned, I had been a nurse for all those years, and this is where I learned that it goes beyond so much more than just talking about a situation, because the body remembers. Even though I dissociated and disconnected myself from that moment, the body still remembers. And as she started bringing me into this process of really digging deep into my body and letting all the sensations come up, I literally could feel like I was being anchored and pinned down to a table when I was in session with her. And I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I felt like the weight of the world was just pushing me down. And I realized that even though I disconnected, my body did not disconnect. My body was still holding on to the trauma of what happened that night. But more than anything, through her creating a safe space and witnessing me and allowing me to move through this with her, and someone being there and standing up for me and saying, you know what? Yes, maybe your mom suffered rape as well, and she didn't know how to deal with this. She didn't know how to deal with you. She was probably just as scared. You probably brought up a lot of her own memories that still didn't make it right, that no one stood up for you, that no one protected you, that no one kept you safe, that no one acknowledged you, and that no one saw you. It didn't make it right. And it was that finally, that having that someone who stood there with me and said, you know what? Your mom should have protected you. That person from the church should have said something. They should have stood up for you. You were a child. You were a child. You didn't know. There was nothing you could have done. And it was their role to stand up for you, to protect you, to make you know that you were worthy of being protected, that no one gets to touch you. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. It doesn't matter what environment you are in, that you don't need to walk out into the world and be leery of who's going to attack you, because that is not normal behavior. And through continuing to work with her, I started to all of a sudden lean into what it was to be in my body, to land in my body, to know that it was safe to be there, that I didn't have to constantly run from it, that I can fully embody it. And I started actually feeling more comfortable being back in my body. I started realizing that I was becoming more playful. I was moving more and really enjoying being in this body, that it was safe to be here. And that I was now old enough and knew enough to be responsible, to be responsible in the sense of that I didn't have to rely on someone else to come and tell me that I needed to be safe, but that now I can speak up and I can say, hey, this happened, and no, it wasn't right. And no, I did not deserve this. And no, this is not normal behavior. And no, it's not just because he's a man. It's not just something that happens to women. It also, as I started continuing my healing journey, and it's definitely a process and there's definitely layers, and I think it's important for everybody to know that just because you do a little bit of healing around it or some healing around it, it does not mean that there's not other layers that keep coming up. Because even as I keep doing my own healing around this, I've learned that certain men that have certain energies, that have that cocky kind of I'm the guy energy, will elicit a fear in me and make me feel intimidated. And they can be the nicest men, but once they have that energy, it's like my body recognizes it and shuts down. And I've learned to, even in those moments, sit back and be like, this is not the guy who raped you. And it's safe for you to be in this body, and you don't have to jump out and you don't have to run away, and you can set your boundaries, you can set your parameters, and you can say no. And as I'm learning to, it's like I said, it's a process. As I continue to learn to feel safe in this body and keep dropping in and knowing that it's good, it's healthy to be here, it makes it possible for me to be in those situations and sit back and remind myself, I am safe. I am safe, and it is healthy to be in this body. And what they did wasn't okay. And it's important to speak up, and it's important to be seen. And now I know that. And through this work, what I hope is, and why I'm speaking up here, is because I want people to know that it's not just because it's a guy, or just that guys get to do guy things and that's just what they do, that it's not okay. That it doesn't matter what you're wearing, it does not enable someone to touch you. That just because you are in a restaurant working and doing your job with another person, it does not give him permission to touch you. And it's safe to speak up and say something. And if one person turns you down, you keep going. Because there are people out here who will see you, who will hear you, and who want to help you. So I hope that this, I'm sharing this because I want to help people, and I want people to see that this is a process. And I hope that in sharing this, it lands and lets people know that you have a choice. You don't deserve to be treated this way. You deserve to be seen, and keep asking for help, because there are people out there who want to see you, who want to help you. And that you can find your way back, and that you can feel safe in your body, and that you can be empowered, and that you can enjoy being in this body and living life again without that fear, without that unconscious belief that you have to watch your back. So thank you. Thank you, ladies, for letting me be here in this space with you guys and share my story.
Well, thank you so much, Yaritza, for sharing. I'm like taking everything in right now. But thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your story, because I know it's not easy sometimes sharing your own story. I struggle sharing my story, to be honest with you. This is why I have everybody else over here talking. But thank you so much. Thank you. I really do appreciate sharing your story. It is powerful. Your voice has power. Everybody's voice has power. So thank you,
Yes.
Jessica. And
Thank
if
you.
anybody wants to, reach out to you, are you okay with people reaching out with you? Because sometimes it helps to talk to people who have been through similar situations.
Absolutely, absolutely. You guys can find me at The Sacred Soma. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and you can just send me a direct message right through there, and I'm happy to connect with anyone who wants to just talk and share and connect.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And just as a reminder to everybody, we are going to be recording this. We are recording this, and we're going to be sending it to everybody, as well as the slides that we had earlier, and everybody's contact information. Before Yaritza exits, does anybody in the audience have questions for her?
I do just want to add that for those of you that don't know, we do have a Q&A open. So if you look for it on your screen, there's a Q&A. You can start asking questions or submitting questions, and we'll answer them at the end.
Awesome. And everybody's just saying thank you, Yaritza, for sharing your story. We have some people over here that say that they can relate to you. So we're reaching people. Thank you so much again, Yaritza. Alrighty, Michelle, can you guide us to the next, please?
Yes, so next we're going to go ahead and start the Q&A or the discussion. So if our attendees can go ahead and pull up your questions so that we know what we're talking about. The first topic that we want to talk about today is, how do I know if I was raped, and what do I do? So I guess if we can start with Gabriella.
Okay, so the question, I think I was sexually assaulted, raped. How do I know if I really was? What do I do? So there's legal definitions regarding assault and rape, and those are different between counties, states, and things like that. So those are the legal definitions, which can be helpful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fit into that specific legal definition. So how do I know? You and your body, your body, how you feel. No one can tell you anything about your body. No one can tell you anything about how you feel. If you feel that somewhere deep inside, you know what, that didn't feel great, or that's not sitting well with me, but you don't have the personal definition, yeah, you can look at the legal definitions. But at the end of the day, if something doesn't inherently sit well within your gut, you should listen to that and reach out to someone whom you trust, whether that is a parent, whether that is a close friend, whether that is calling a hotline where you will stay anonymous and you want to just kind of touch base and touch the ground that way. Reaching out, but knowing that even if the feedback that you're getting, still you're like, no, something, maybe they weren't open, maybe they were dismissive, or maybe that it still just does not feel right, reaching out to someone in the mental health field or calling one of the helplines that are out there, but just really trusting inherently what your gut is, because you are going to be the best expert of your body. You are the best expert of your experiences. No one can dictate that for you. So those will be the initial basics that I would say is that, how do I know what it really was? What would I do? Is starting out there, but really trusting in yourself, because there are going to be many people out there going to be like, well, no, it's not really this, or no, it's not really that, but well, what was really the situation? Things like that. Trust your absolute instincts, because your instincts are yours and they are there for a reason. That's how I would best answer that.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. Paola?
Yeah, so you guys, I think all of that is so true. Gabriela, thank you for sharing. And I think it is expected that you are going to feel confused, that it's going to be, your memory is going to be a little bit fuzzy. But I go back to this importance of consent, you guys, which I'm sure, Gabriela, you shared this with me, that the sex education that we have in schools, in colleges, they don't really, well, now it's changed a bit, but even early on, nobody talks to us about consent and nobody talks to us about pleasure. So one, was I old enough to consent? Was I aware enough to consent, right? We know that alcohol, drugs are gonna diminish your ability to consent. So thinking about the body, thinking about consent, and really being mindful, you guys, that consent can change. Consent is a continuous engagement with the self. And the reality is that 79 to 80% of assailants are someone that you know. And this idea that even in being sexually assaulted, and Emily Nagoski has a great TED Talk about this, you can have a physiological response of pleasure, and that makes it a little bit tricky. And I love that it's a story, to her point, where she says, well, was he wearing a short skirt? You guys, we can see someone with the little tiny dress in the corner, drunk as a skunk. Most of us are going to try to help this person. An assailant is going to take advantage of that situation. So I think, and I love the idea of reaching out that someone you can trust. I think RAINN has a lot of great resources. You can call a number and they're going to guide you. They're going to guide you. It's confidential. They're going to give you referrals. They're going to tell you the laws of the state that you're in. So part of telling your story, I think this is a big predictor to the healing process being a little bit moving forward, because we can really get stuck in this place. But I think that's what I would like to add. And of course, if at some point you felt manipulated or forced or coerced, that also is an indicator. There was something else that I wanted to say. It'll come to me. But yes, I think those are the ones that I would want to say when it comes to consent.
Thank you, Paola. Shaloma, if you have anything to say about that part.
Yeah, I definitely think Paola and Gabriela touched on everything. But one thing I would also think is something that really touched me with Gabriela said is someone you trust, and not someone you think you should trust. I think, oftentimes, and in my past experience, I went to someone I thought I could trust, and not someone who had demonstrated that they you know, really cared about me. So really taking a good stock in your life, because this is traumatizing. It is something that if you share with someone who's ill-equipped, it can do damage, like we saw with Yuritz's story. And you want to make sure that you're essentially you're exposing yourself again. So you were already exposed when this unfortunate event happened to you, and reliving it, you're exposing yourself again. So if you're not doing that with someone who's going to understand that that's what you're doing and really comfort you, it can be more damaging. So I would definitely say not the people you think you should trust. And maybe that is your mom, but she said things in the past about you or your friends or just other women in her lives that made you feel uncomfortable. Maybe that isn't the person you go to. Maybe you've just met this person for a year, but they've demonstrated over the year that they genuinely love, respect, honor, and treasure you. Yes, saying it out loud, you might be like, I only know this person for a year, but if you feel at home with them, you might share that with them over your mother just because of what they've demonstrated to you. So not what you think you should do, but what you in your body know is going to not add to your discomfort, and at least hopefully, if not alleviate it, just create a space where you feel safe enough to even share that and feel supported, even if they're just listening. So I think I would say that's like the most important thing that I would share. Just choose someone that you know is going to do more good than harm.
Thank you for that, Shaloma. I agree. I think that we all should be adding to our support systems because it's a very solitary experience when you go through alone. So if you add some, whether it's a therapist or a friend or your family member, or even just somebody that you call on RAINN.org, because they have a 24/7 hotline for victims of sexual assault. Find whoever you can find, but don't be alone. Which bring us to the next question. What signs and symptoms are associated with sexual assault and rape?
So I can start that one. And listen, I remember what I wanted to say, sorry, but something I think in it's a story, what she talked about, which I think is really common. And it's another thing because we're going to convince ourselves, no, maybe that didn't happen. And it's our way to kind of avoid and compartmentalize all this traumatic experience that we're feeling. But in her story, like many other women, they traded silence and stillness for safety and survival. And the sad truth is that there's still countries that in order for the victim to defend themselves, they need to see that the victim has physical marks of a continuous and vigorous fight with the assailant, which most of the time doesn't happen because we either disassociate from our body, have that freeze response that Yalitza was talking about, but also when you're in a situation, this big guy using their power, right? In order for us to survive, we're gonna hold still, hope that it ends. I hear this a lot. I just, wanted it to get over or get through quickly. And so it is really important to think of that. You guys, we know that 94% of women are going to experience some type of PTSD symptoms within 2 weeks of the assault. It is a traumatic event. And like Yalitza was saying, there's a lot that you hold in your body. There's this great concept that the body keeps the score. So it's going to be really hard maybe to remember certain details of what happened. You're going to have distressing memories, distorted cognitions about yourself. There's going to be dreams. Sometimes people can experience some disassociation, which is basically like seeing yourself out, almost like an out-of-body experience. Anxiety, depression, anything that would come up when you experience a traumatic event. It is important to understand that for you to have the full diagnosis of PTSD, the symptoms have to happen, pretty much consistently over a month. But I would say that shame, right, and self-blame is one that shows up a lot. And like in Yalitza's story, what we notice is that same shame takes her out of her connection with herself. What am I gonna wear? Is this person okay? And so it really disrupts the intimacy that we build in relationships, right? And I love this definition of intimacy is the perfect balance between vulnerability and safety. Our vulnerability are more compass. Can I trust people when I go out there in the world? So dreams, hypervigilance, kind of like what Yarisa was talking about. I get out of the house and I'm looking around. All of these are symptoms that you may experience after a traumatic event.
Thank you for that.
I would also like to add, what signs or symptoms should I be mindful of? Well, there are a lot of victims that it will be years until they even notice something that's happened. I've worked with many women where something has happened in their early adolescence or even adolescence, and now they're 27, 28, 30, whatnot. A different type of event happened, nothing where they would even, something extremely not even associated with an event that they had in the past, but there was just a little something, a sound, a movement, a specific touch, something like so unbelievably tiny, and they just, like, all the hair on their back of their neck stood up, like something is not right, and that's when they start maybe having a dream, or they recall something. They're like, well, what is that? I don't remember this. So, gaps of time sometimes that we can't account for, or if we start having symptoms many, many, many years after, it's like, okay, well, I'm starting to remember this and that, and starting to explore history around, like, events around that time, people around that time, and things like that. And that's where different therapeutic techniques help, whether that is hypnosis, whether that is other types of technique to help you figure out, like, what is, attached to this new reaction that we have, that we're connecting to our past. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have all these signs and symptoms happening right away. Sometimes we do, depends on the situation, but it's not always the case. So always asking yourself, like, what exactly is happening right now that is different for me? What am I connecting it to? If I don't have an absolute answer, that is okay, but we can put that, almost like, okay, this is something I need to, like, be aware of, because there's something to this, something happened. It could be sexual assault, it could be some other type of traumatic event, especially if it's been something that happened in the past. So that would be something that I would add, also with all the wonderful things that Paola had mentioned.
Thank you, Gabriela. Shaloma?
So I'm not a clinical psychologist, psychiatrist. I'm not as certified and awesome as Paola and Gabriela. But what I can speak to is just like my experience and the experiences that I, seen with my friends and family. And I'd say my two big buckets were like an absence of feelings. So kind of what Gabriela touched on, just not feeling anything. Just feeling as if it's like a blank slate. No happiness, no sadness, no anger, just if someone was to ask me how I felt, I would just say, I'm alive, So that was a big bucket. And then irritability about certain things. And it's just like, do you want to go to a party? No, I don't want to go to the party. I don't know why I don't want to go to the party. I don't want to go, being very short and very irritable. And something that worked for me is what Gabriela spoke upon, is taking stock on my feelings. Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, this was a regular question, but really having to sit with myself and really take stock of my feelings. And I was in this place where it's like, okay, no feelings. And now I have all the feelings, is how I would describe it. That irritability, you just constantly feel on edge. I think hypervigilance is what Paola said. So it's like, those were my, two big buckets. And I had to realize, why am I going between these two, extremes? It's autopilot, or I'm feeling everything. And that was something I recognized as well with my friends. Like, I'm super bubbly, my friends are super bubbly, but what day we're not bubbly? We're really quiet, we're not engaging, we're not asking questions, we're being very short and just not characteristically ourselves. So when you know yourself and you know your personality traits, and you find that there's an absence of that, sitting down with yourself, because sometimes you are protecting yourself by not walking that journey of memory, but it is necessary for growth and to return to that intimacy of appreciating your body and wanting to be present in your body. So I would definitely say those are my, two big buckets. And I had to kind of walk that journey to find the middle point. Like, it's not okay to not feel anything, but it's also not okay to feel everything, and to be irritable without cause, some would say, or, you know, not explaining myself or feeling like anyone deserved an explanation to my feelings, because when I had these intense feelings, you didn't care. So now that I don't have feelings, you shouldn't care either. And really understanding that can equally be damaging as well, not only to myself and my process, but to those who do love me and are concerned about me. So really taking a stock of myself, my feelings, and finding a middle point that either of these extremities aren't the key to happiness or sustained happiness. Because I thought I was happy when I didn't feel anything, but looking back on it, it was, completely autopilot, which is something that I do see a lot with like my friends and the friends that I know that have been through something. They also, you know, can speak to that autopilot feeling when you're just trying to get through life and you're not checking in with yourself. And then when you do check in with yourself, you don't like what you see, so then you go back. So I would say, those are my two consistent feelings that I really had to like work through. And I'm happy for it, because it taught me the practice of checking in with myself. So now when I find myself shutting down, whether it's with my friends or even with myself, like I like to tell myself good morning. So when I wake up and I don't say good morning, I'm like, what happened? And I think about my dreams and how did I end my day the previous day. So it's a constant thing. And I think Yuritsa spoke to that the process isn't when you realize, okay, I'm feeling disconnected and like I'm on autopilot, or today I feel very intense about everything. It's continuously every day waking up and recommitting to the fight, or the work, is which I call it. Like, did I do the work today? I think I did. I checked in with myself. I spoke to her. We love each other. We're doing good. Some days I don't do the work and I feel it, but at least I'm aware of how I made a fall short that day, and then recommit the next day. So autopilot isn't fun, and super intense isn't fun as well.
Thank you for that, Shaloma. I do want to touch on something that Gabriela had mentioned earlier. She had said something along the lines of, excuse me, that not every victim experiences the same symptoms or reacts the same way. And one of the things that I've noticed growing up is that a lot of times when somebody is sexually assaulted, excuse me, one of the things that they do in reaction is kind of stop caring about their body safety and sexuality. They become active in promiscuous activities. So they just completely stop loving themselves, and they just start having promiscuous sex with, you know, random people they don't know, people who they know may be a danger to them. What do you and Gabriela and Paola have to say about that, as far as the psychology that goes into it?
So it depends. Well, age is a factor. So let's say this event happened, you know, the assault happened to someone in pre-adolescence or early stage of their teenage years. It's a heck of a lot of stuff that developmentally, emotionally would be very difficult to understand and process. And for many, well, just going and it's almost like, how can I best describe it? It's like, you know, for me to understand or whatnot, I'm going to put this, you know, aside, and I'm just going to do what it is what I'm here for. Like, it compartmentalizes in a very, very different way. So yes, many do start to become more promiscuous. Many start to go into drugs, depression. Some will start having different types of occasionally where they are controlling their intake of food in a different way. So not necessarily completely, you know, anorexia or bulimia, but they're, you know, it's something that they can control. Anger happens a lot, but it's not going to be the same for everyone. Everyone is going to be a little bit different. Some will even start to gain a lot of weight in a way well, this way it's kind of almost like a physical shield and things like that. So everyone is going to be a little bit different in how they react to an assault, how they process it, whether they want to share it, not want to share it, how they feel about themselves, how they view themselves, you know, whether they are just, you know, if they feel shame or they go to anger. Everyone is going to be a little bit different in the way that they process and react, or if they just put it on hold for a bit because processing and reacting for them, the only way to do that would be right now, you know what? I'm just going to put over here in a box and it's just going to stay there. And I'm just to study for my chemistry test. We're just going to move forward. And then later on, other things occur, and that's when they take that little box off the shelf. So everyone's a little bit different because there's so many ways that people react to this. One of the reasons why I believe so many people ask so many questions, well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you say that? Or, you know, why didn't you react this way? It's because everybody's just going to be different. It's like there is no cookie cutter way for anyone to react around this.
And I think if I can add, yes, something that you said, Gabriela, which is so true, is so difficult to understand. So it's really tough to process. And I think you guys, you know, what you described, Gabriela, I call this the emotional storage, right? Like we start to store all these things, but eventually it becomes an emotional warehouse. And we have so much things in there that, and something that I noticed, you guys, and I don't know, Gabriela, if you noticed this in your practice, during quarantine, because there was more stillness and all the distractions, you know, because Miami we could be distracted every second of the day. When all these distractions started to almost like, you know, the volume went down, I saw a lot of people come to therapy wanting to work on those old traumas. I always say that through stillness, you either find healing or chaos. Sometimes we meditate and we're like, oh my God, I didn't realize, or sometimes we're holding still and we're like, all these things are coming up and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. And I think when people become promiscuous or just want to fill their time, I think, you know, there's a root of shame and self-blame, but it's easier to trust the chaos than to trust that someone is not going to betray me. And sex sometimes become a way to seek the intimacy that they don't feel they deserve. Right? Age, I think, has to do a lot. And Shalom, I love what you said. Every morning I wake up and I say, I'm aware. Checking in with yourself is so important. And it's okay if that awareness happens after you did something and you're like, holy crap, eventually you'll get really good at it. But this idea of recommitting to the fight, and I have to do that daily. But I also do see people start to detach from their body with their weight gain. You know, it doesn't feel that playful and that freedom that you used to. Now somebody else's uses for their own pleasure.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And that kind of brings it to the next question that I kind of wish I maybe knew this before, because I actually was numb for so many years until I had to have that conversation with my husband that brought it back. So I brought it into therapy. So what do you do if you know you were raped, but you feel numb out of the whole situation?
I think it's going to be different for everyone. And it really depends on what that person really wants to do at the moment. If they're like, you know what, you know, I feel numb and things like that, but I want to go the legal route. Well, for the legal route, that has its own set of rules and dictations and things like that that are not necessarily the most supportive of a person processing stuff. If that person decides, well, you know what, I don't want to deal with this right now, that's okay. They are completely in control to how they want to do that. So they can, you say, you know what, I know this happened, but I don't want to deal with it right now. Fine, they put it in a little box. And if someone is, you know, I feel numb and things like that, I don't want anyone to know. I don't feel a level of safety, or I feel I will not be understood or whatnot within my circles, then obviously don't go that route, because that's not going to be helpful. Then either seeing a therapist or connecting with one of the many organizations that, you know, specialize to help support individuals that have gone through those. So it's basically asking, like, I know this happened. First question is, do I want to deal with it now or not? Which that is a fair question. If the answer is no, all right, put it in the box. If the answer is yes, do I want to deal with it the legal route, or do I want to deal with it personally? Which are fair questions to ask. Because at the end of the day, you get the choice. That person gets the choice. So it's basically going through those gentle steps, because, you know, feeling numb is our body and mind's amazing way to start protecting ourselves in certain ways. Because everybody has, you know, a different way of reacting. That just happens to be one way. You know, some people are able to start processing and sitting back to see, you know, what has happened, which is fine. So I would say starting with those gentle questions to oneself, because at the end of the day, they get to choose.
Thank you for that, Gabby. Paola?
So I actually, you guys, something that I think, Shaloma, you said this when you talked a little bit about, well, I don't want to go to the party, but it's like, okay, well, why, right? Am I just kind of like going through the motions of life? And I would say numbing behaviors, right, you guys, because a lot of the times we may develop an alcohol disorder just because, you know, it is easier to numb. And the truth is that avoidance kind of works, right? I think it's a really fair question. What Gabriela said, do I want to deal with this now? But I also see people, you know, if we're feeling anxious about something and we don't want to deal with it, avoidance is perfect. It solves my issue because now I don't have to deal with it. But understanding that avoidance and thinking away is a way to protect, right? And I think, and also I love this idea of like messages around culture and messages around society and how we deal with certain things, what we're talking about today, because I think as women, you know, we avoid, and men get this too. I mean, men, you know, talking about their feelings in many cultures is a threat to their masculinity. Betsy, you were talking about you being Nicaraguan, I'm Colombian. You know, if a boy cries, the dad says, you know, you're not a girl, or crying is for wussies, or all the sayings that we have in our culture. And so what I learned, that in order for me to maintain connection, I have to suppress my emotions. So there's something underlying all of that. And I'm Colombian, right? So in my culture, you know, we're taught that being a strong woman is getting from point A to point B, no matter if your knees are scraped, no matter if you can hardly breathe. If she's being productive and if she gets there, she's good, she's strong, self-reliant, don't depend on anyone. So I think that there's a lot of cultural messages that we need to challenge and grow away from in order to start facing some of the experiences that have happened to us. I think self-help is great, but sometimes I think we're in a society where it's like self-help, like we can somehow all resolve our own issues, and we all have blind spots, right? But I think, you know, it's interesting. I think we have to be aware of the noise, right? Like if a neighbor, in my country, if a neighbor loses a child, which is a very traumatic experience, and we see that the neighbor every day leaves to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and they come back at 10 o'clock at night, oh, they must be doing well, right? Because they're going to work. You know, they're working super long hours. So avoidance is sometimes more acceptable if I look in the window and the lady hasn't left, my neighbor hasn't left, they're home for 3 days, then I start wondering, well, something must be really wrong, right? So also thinking about how, you know, in our culture, in our society, I think avoidance is something that is, you know, that is communicated in all these types and ways.
And I wanted to share as well. So I'm Jamaican. So it's definitely similar to all of you ladies' backgrounds about the super masculine men and the archetype of like the strong yet submissive woman. Like I don't understand how they expect us to play dual roles simultaneously. Like I have to be super submissive for my man. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, but I don't take no jazz. I'm strong. I can do it on my own, you know? So once again, I can only speak to my experience. Like definitely what Gabriela said, like it was someone that I knew, someone that I liked and I considered dating. So when it happened, I was like, okay, do I want to deal with this? And I was like, I was in college. I think it was like, I was in grad school. I was doing my thesis and I was like, okay, so am I going to shift my focus and my priorities from myself? Because these are the things I want to accomplish, seeing my thesis through, graduating, or am I going to, this is not a recommendation, it was my thought at the time, or do I want to direct any energy to this man who did this to me? And not to say that when you decide to pursue like legal action or any type of action, that you're giving them energy, because you're also, it's a way to help yourself. But at the time, because I knew what I wanted to focus on, I just felt like I didn't want to deal with it at the time. So like I didn't tell anyone about it. I kind of just threw myself into my work. I was working at the city of Binghamton at the time, which is where I was doing my master's. So I was working full time. I was like, I'm picking up shifts like crazy for people who wanted time off, because I was the youngest person on my team. So they had families. So I'm picking up shifts. I'm like throwing myself into my degree. I'm picking up extra thesis hours because I just didn't want to deal with it. And then I realized that's exactly what I was doing, that I was directing energy and keeping myself busy, and not taking a time to even like breathe and think about what had happened to me. So I started with like my two best friends who like didn't go to school with me. So I felt like, okay, I'm sharing, but it's not someone who's physically going to impose on my space and like make me talk about this or like kind of smother me, because that was also something I was scared about. I wanted to share in a way that was comfortable for me. I didn't want it to be I don't know how old everyone is, but a Diane Sawyer, interview. I didn't want it to be an expose. I didn't want the pressure of someone asking me intimate details, waking up and checking in on me, are you doing okay? So having it be people that I was connected to, my very best friends, but not having them with me in Binghamton, provided me the opportunity to call, talk to them, check in, and then step away, and felt that I had shared, and I was able to alleviate myself of some pressure and then go back to my day. I did, practice self-care. So I did a lot of bubble baths in that time. I stepped away from as much as the thesis hours as I was putting into only what was, really necessary to me completing my time. I never pursued, legal action. It's still something that I think about every once and again, not the act of pursuing legal action, but just how I feel that it was someone that I knew, that I was, that I cared about, that I thought cared about me. And then even still speaking to them after it happened, because I wasn't sure what happened. And I knew that emotionally I liked them, and I didn't like what happened physically, but that didn't make them a bad person, right? And they were this person who I liked and welcomed into my home. So obviously there was something there. So it is something that every once in a while, like I think on, but it doesn't do to my brain and my body what it did before, which was waves of sadness and disappointment in myself and shame. Now it's like, okay, it's something that happened, and I know that wasn't cool, and I know that if it happens again, there won't be a doubt in my mind of not believing myself, of talking myself out of what happened, because at the end of the day it was someone that I knew and that I cared about, and really understanding what happened, what I do differently, and that everything is okay. What I did, my actions in the past are okay. How I chose to handle the situation may have been different from others, but it was okay for me and to me, because I don't feel like I further damaged myself, kind of stepping away from my academics. And, it was a lot of cultural, social things that I felt like would have been brought to the conversation. And I was just like, I didn't see how it would help me in my journey. Do I regret the decision? I can say no, but like I said, this is not advice for anyone. I just did what I felt was the thing for me to do. Haven't spoken to that person, but it was so random. I started my organization, like I said, and I don't have this person on any kind of channels or whatever. And they donated to my organization. And that was a triggering moment, because I'm like, oh, so you think we're friends? Like, you think this is okay? You think you're doing something for me by donating to my organization, but little do you know, you just like triggered me. And in that way, I kind of think back to what I'd done and if I handled the situation correctly. But correctly is by your standards. And I, Shaloma, feel like I did the right thing for myself. Maybe other survivors would, say something different, but everyone has their own path and their own journey. And when I think about it, I feel safe. I feel present. I don't feel like I'm running from what happened to me. And I feel like I'm able to continue living my life as the Shaloma that I wanted to be and saw myself being. So that was just my personal experience on dealing with the numbness. I overworked myself, but then I had to kind of take a step back and deal with it in the way that was safest for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shaloma, for that. And I agree with you. Everybody's way is going to be different, because we all experience this differently. The next question, I think I'm going to skip the next question, because I feel like within the conversation we've answered this one. The next question was, why can't I remember everything that happened to me? I think we've established this because that's basically the brain protecting ourselves sometimes. but I want to jump into one of the questions from the audience because I feel like this is somewhat related to that question. And here's what the audience says. As a former police officer, I have been first at the location of rapes. What is the best way to connect with the victim?
So I think I can really speak to that. So early on in my career, I was a child protective investigator for Broward Sheriff's Office. So I handled cases of child abuse, sexual molestation, rape, abandonment, neglect, And so I was one of those people who had to take children from their homes and possibly adjudicate them dependent onto the state. So I was at a lot of first respond calls for from infants all the way to 17. Tomorrow I'm turning 18, or so, like children, like all of them. If they were under 18, they were under our, and it was a call coming in like that, they were under our caseload. And so the police departments, or the legal field, the criminal legal field has not for many years. Some departments are getting a little bit better. Don't do a great job when it comes to how to approach victims because of the information that they are required to get for their investigative purposes. It doesn't help. I'm gonna flat out say it doesn't help. But is that information vitally important? Absolutely. So how do we take something that is very, very, very important, but yet still honor, support, a person who has gone through this event, kind of. So I always took the approach, and I always recommend take the approach is one of the basic things to, help support the, well, I got to get this information because it's super important, especially if we go down the legal route, to, well, here's this young, person, and in my experience, young people, because they were all under the age of 18, to not traumatize them more, to not, make what they have gone through even more challenging and traumatic for them, because now there's all these questions and all these people now in their lives, and depending on what the situation, they're going to have a physical exam and all of this stuff. So how to bridge those two. At the basic level is the words that we absolutely choose to use when we engage with someone who has been through a traumatic event. In those, if one is working as a police officer or investigator and things like that. So asking, sitting down with a person, is like, I would really love to understand in your own words, what has happened tonight? That one question, and just let them talk. Instead of going like, well, at what time did the assailant come in at such a, or, where did they touch you here? Did they touch you there? Is there, and start doing all of these things is, please, I would really like to understand what has been the experience that you've had this evening. Why don't you start from when you left home? And just sit there and listen. And actually removing the word you as much as possible. Well, what were you doing at this time? Instead saying, at 5 o'clock, what were the circumstances happening? I'm not even using the word you, because every time I use the word you, for many people, it's, well, what did you do at this time? Like how did you contribute? It gets that connotation. So removing the word you as much as possible and saying like, okay, when such and such person came into the room, why don't you describe to me the things that happened at the time? Where were they moving? Why don't you describe the room to me, where everything was located? So I'm using words and questions where I'm not going to try in any way, shape, or form have my questions feel like, well, I'm trying to see what you're saying is really what happens, or anything like that. Or, how did you kind of like set the situation up, things like that. So when we work in law enforcement, things like that, at the basics, I know the information that we need to get is super duper important, but the way we get it can be done a heck of a lot better, like 1,000 times better, because it is not just the initial officer or investigator that's going to be involved depending on the situation. Then there is the medical team, and and then it's going to be other specialists and things like that. So it's going to be an array of people. So choosing the words initially is at the basic level is how I would answer that question.
Thank you so much for that, Gabby. And I agree. Sometimes when we use the word you, it does feel like they're accusing you of something, like you were at fault. So I feel like that's very helpful. Thank you so much. Anything else Paula or Shaloma wants to add to this?
I just wanted to add that I really love what Gabriela said, because from my personal experience, having to experience the legal system so many times through sexual assault, it happened to me 3 times in my life. So that's why I say so many times. The second time was the first time that I decided to report it. And I remember the female detective asking me, well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? And I felt so small in that little office. Like, I felt so tiny and uncomfortable all of a sudden. I really thought that the prosecutors were going to help me and that they were going to protect me. But that little question just made me want to shut down and run away. So I agree, like, if you steer away from using the word you, it'll make the person who went through the experience feel that much more comfortable to give you all of the information and details. And another thing is that when it happens, there's so many things going through your head, you don't remember everything at the same time. Sometimes you'll remember things later on. Sometimes you mix things up because there are so many different emotions and so many different people that you have to talk to, and it just becomes overwhelming and tiring and draining. So I really love the way that you basically like framed the interview, just being mindful that this is a human being that was harmed and that they're probably scared to even be talking.
Thank you for that. Let me go then to the next question that we have over here. This is, sometimes I forget where I am or who I'm with. It's like I'm no longer in the present, but at the same time, at the same time that I was assaulted. So whenever those experiences come, kind of like, I guess, when you go back to that moment, even though you're in a safe place, what are some of the things people can do to kind of bring themselves back and knowing that they're safe now?
Yeah, you guys, understanding, I think, right, one of the things that happens is a little bit of, I think Gabriela was talking a little bit about this, lapses in time. And one of the things that I really like to use, and Yaritza was talking a little bit about somatic, right, like how to be in your body. I really like doing grounding exercises. So you guys, if maybe you can join me on doing this little grounding exercise, we can kind of slouch our shoulders back, feel our feet on the ground, wiggle our toes. So we're gonna notice 5 things in your environment that you see. So I see the little mirror over there, I see my lamp, I see my plant, I see this bottle of water that's black. So 5 things in your environment that you see. 4 things in your environment that you feel, and not so much feeling, but I feel the back on the chair, I feel the pen on my hand, I feel my glasses on my face. 3 things that you smell, right? So if there's anything, if you can close your eyes and smell anything in your environment, maybe you have a candle on, maybe there's something in the air that you can smell, your perfume. 2 things that you hear. So again, if you can close your eyes, is there anything in your environment that you hear other than my voice, right? And 1 thing that you can taste. And telling yourself, I am safe in my body, in a context that I've chosen. I am in control. We're gonna take a deep breath. 4 seconds in, as if you were smelling flowers. 5 seconds out as if you were blowing bubbles. We're gonna slowly open up our eyes and get back into the room. So guys, that is a quick, and I went through it a little bit quickly, but just really being able to slow yourself down. And even if you can't remember, it doesn't have to be 5, 4, 3, 2, but just even being able to close your eyes and getting back into the moment and reminding yourself that you are safe in your body in a context that you've chosen and you're in control, because a lot of the times it is gonna feel like you are re-experiencing that trauma.
Thank you for that, Paola. So the next question that I have is, why do I see my assailant almost everywhere I go and start fearing for my life, even though I know they are nowhere near me?
So I would say, everybody experiences trauma differently. Everybody processes trauma differently. Everybody's symptoms are going to be different. So some people start to experience, and this is regardless if they start to have these memories down the road or soon after an assault. Some of us become very hypervigilant, very, very hypervigilant. We notice, well, let's say, for example, let's say the person who assaulted us was wearing a red shirt. All of a sudden, everywhere we go, that person's wearing a red shirt. That person has red socks. I see that's a red car over there, like red, red, red. Like everything that we can notice in our environment, like red. Our body is wanting to protect us. Our mind is wanting to protect us. So we start to become sometimes a bit hypervigilant, and we will notice things in our environment from that event in different ways, whether it's a color, whether it's a sound, whether it's a physical feeling where, maybe they had grabbed us in a certain way, or there was a sound that we had heard. We will be hypersensitive to those very particular shapes, sounds, colors, noises, tastes, things like that. And that is just part of, symptoms that some people have after a traumatic event such as those.
Alrighty. Do any of you want to add more to that?
Okay, thank you for that, Gabriela. The next question that we have is relating to childhood sexual assault. What impacts does child sexual assault have on?
Hey guys, so I think such an interesting topic. I think two of the factors that are the most damaging, right, when people experience child sexual abuse is shame and self-blame. And this kind of predisposes you for re-victimization. The other thing, right, yes, we know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 13 men experience some type of sexual abuse at some point, right? So statistics are really high. And you can also develop a drug disorder and alcohol disorder, as many people do, to deal with childhood sexual trauma. And so, of course, this type of situations are also going to affect you being re-victimized. But I cannot talk, you guys, about shame enough, right? Because shame takes you right out of connection to your body and to the person that you're with. And there's also a lot of research, and I know I'm kind of getting off topic a bit, but at some point maybe we can talk a little bit about this, how childhood sexual abuse or being sexually assaulted, right, definitely contributes to sexual dysfunction. But I think that shame and self-blame are the two leading factors that cause that level of re-victimization, and also the way that we deal and cope, which is usually unhealthy ways.
I can just speak once again to like my experiences. I believe in a way it stunted my growth. I became highly uncomfortable with the topic of sex. Like certain words, even to this day, like I can't say, or if I say them, I'm like putting my hand over my mouth, I'm like whispering it. So I definitely believe that, you know, you can, to me, it's an extreme. Something traumatic happened to you and you need to kind of fill that gap. So you're going out of the ordinary, right? So two things, in my opinion, two things can happen. You can over sexualize or just go the way opposite. And that was my experience. You know, I lost my virginity like way later in life compared to like my counterparts. Like I said, certain words I just can't even say. And that's, I can say, as opposed to the experience that happened to me in college, what happened to me in my youth, I think is the cornerstone of, or the biggest thing that I have to work through and is currently working through. Look at me, I'm stumbling. So obviously you guys can see the emotion. But yeah, and from my experiences, it really made me uncomfortable with the topic of sex and anything sexually related. And I didn't realize that for quite some time. It wasn't until I was in a long-term relationship with someone and they're like, why every time do I like go to hug you, like you jump? And this was a comment that I heard throughout my life, like in high school, early college, grad school. I never put the connection together that, like, you know, when people touch me, my first reaction is always to jump, even when I know that person. Like I said, I've been in a long-term relationship upwards to 10 years and it still happens sometimes. And even, like I say, certain words I just can't say. And he is understanding and comforting and helping me to realize that it was what happened to me in my youth. Because I think he's one of maybe like 5 people. I haven't told my parents. I haven't told my siblings. I even haven't, I think I told my 2 best friends that I keep, you know, hearkening back to because I feel really comfortable with them and knew them for over, you know, 12, 15 years at this point. But I think it can have really adverse reactions in a multitude of ways. But my experience was with the apprehension to sex and all things sexually related, and really struggling with that as I got older. You know, I am 28 years old right now, and I think it's a bit funny that I can't say some words, you know, and that I'm whispering them when I'm saying it. Or, you know, as you get older, you and your girlfriends, you want to get together and talk about your life and your experiences with men, and they just know, like, nope, that's something Shoma isn't going to do. And I'm there and I'm listening, I'm supportive for them, but like, I don't ask questions. I'm just sitting there, I'm waiting for the conversation to be over. So it's now I'm really trying to figure out, what does sexuality look like for me as I am getting older, and what does that mean for my partner, and we, you know, having children and things of that. I know that's something that I have to continuously you know, break apart and sit with and work with. But in my experience, the opposite of the hypersexualization happened. I was just like, nope, don't want to talk about it. We're not talking about it. We're not having it. You know, it was something that was so other than myself. So I know that that's an other way that, you know, someone can deal with being traumatized or sexually assaulted in their youth.
And you guys, one more thing, I think I love what you said, Shaloma, because in order for us to be able to be sexual or sensual with someone, in order to experience an orgasm, in order to let natural arousal take over, we have to have the willingness to let go of control in the context of another in our relationship. And imagine, talking a little bit about what Gabriela was saying, hypervigilance. People overthink, okay, I'm going to leave the home, I'm going to walk 3 steps. Overthinking is the mind's failed attempt to predict, to take yourself to a place of security. So I think this idea of letting go, right? To have good, healthy sex, we have to be vulnerable. But if that has been violated, you guys think, how can we do that? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rowdy Magazine, but there are a group of college students that just write about all these amazing topics. And you know, I wanted to share this quote. This is from Natalia Galicia. And she talked about sexual assault. She used the metaphor of a house being broken into. The article's called "The Body as a Home Broken Into." And she says, a home that is broken into blares in its defense. Floorboards creak, guard dogs bark, alarm systems ring. The breaking and entering echoes. The same goes for the body. Oh, I thought that was amazing. Because if your house gets broken into, you're going to get a dog, you're going to get alarms, right? It's the same thing happens to the body. So I just love that metaphor, and I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much for that. Gabby, do you want to add anything else to this? Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. We're running low on time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I can't believe how fast it went, but we have, Michelle and I have some resources that we want to share with everybody. But before we share our resources, I actually want to know if any resources that you ladies can share with our audience that's available for anybody who's been a sexual assault victim or a rape victim. Is there some resources that you ladies could share, please?
And if you can add them to the chat so the audience can have them for their record.
Ooh, that second part might be a problem for me, but I'm going to definitely try to work on it. If not, I can send you guys an email. So as I mentioned, I met Betsy at and by our, I mean Women of Color in Cannabis, our sexual harassment and meeting we called Me Too and Marijuana. And we saw the need that in cannabis, that there's like this lax environment, that a lot of women are being preyed upon, a lot of bud tenders, a lot of people that throw events or just in the environment in general are being preyed upon and not supported. So we started a private Facebook group. It's invite only, and we're vetting everyone who requests, because we mean it when we say it's a safe space. And in there we have a list of mental health professional that specifically prioritize women of color. We understand that how we navigate the world may be a bit different from our Caucasian counterparts, and we have stressors that they may not necessarily, I won't say all of them, but face, like, poverty, our socioeconomic income, our family compositions. You might live with your grandmother, your aunt, your niece. So just making sure that we're partnering people with professionals who specifically understand what it is they're going through. So we have a nationwide list, and it's not only telephone hotlines, but also actual websites that you can go about. Well, I don't know what they're doing for COVID, but at the time you could make appointments to speak with someone who is a licensed professional and can kind of help you and support you. So I can try to track that link down. I am not computer savvy for the Facebook group, but we do, recommend anyone who wants to, please join it. It's a standing document, so you can download it, and it'll let you know your phone banks and some professionals by your state and also by the city level as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Sholoma. And yes, send me an email with that. And tomorrow we'll send everything to everybody that's here in the audience and that signed up. What about you, Gabby or Paola? Anything you guys want to share for resources?
Well, one of the big ones is, like Paola has mentioned before, RAINN, and RAINN is with 2 N's. So it's, RAINN.org. So that's one of the bigger national ones. But, for many people, obviously they're going to need to Google to find those organizations. But one very simple thing that many people can just know, regardless of where they live, if so like 311 basically almost all over the US is the community directory where, you call 311, you can ask, hey, when, who do I need to call for, an extra trash bin? From that kind of a question to what is the number for me to reach out because I'm feeling suicidal, or I have just been assaulted, who do I contact? It's literally the county's community resource hotline where you can get everything. And that is an unbelievably easy number to remember. It's 311, and it's basically in every single county, in every single state across the US. So at a basic, knowing that one can help start the chain of connection towards exactly what a person may exactly need.
Yes, you guys, I would say, all of these resources, Psychology Today is always a good resource to find a therapist near you. You can filter to only see people that specialize in sexual assault. But, one of the most important things, you guys, as I was preparing for this talk, I had my overwhelming moments because there's a lot of information, and you know how it is. You start reading about something and then you start reading about something and it's like, oh my God. But even hearing some of these TED Talks, there's a great TED Talk by this Argentinian woman. It's in Spanish. I think that's also important. And, there's just, even if the first step is, let me put sexual assault resources or TEDs, and then you start hearing other people tell the story, that is going to help kind of break some of the barriers that we have when it comes to seeking help, because, culturally, that's also a thing, right? Like asking for help, you have to challenge those messages. So I think RAINN is a wonderful resource. They have that 24/7. And if, because you guys, ultimately, when you're sexually assaulted, right, this is very simple. negative association. If you come to my office and in the elevator you have a panic attack, the next time that you come to my office, you're probably going to skip the elevator. You're going to use the stairs. You know, this idea of avoidance happens often. And so the same thing happens in sex, right? If you were violated in one way or another, that is going to show up in your relationship. So Gabriela and I are trained sex therapists, right? So it's important to go to people that are trained and specialized in certain things to kind of like what Shaloma said, help her reclaim and redefine what you want your sexuality to look like moving forward, taking into account the things that you've experienced. So I would say, you know, just, you know, telling your story, hearing about your story is a good step forward. It is hard to make these calls, but, you know, people are resilient and we get through things. And Yaritza's story was just amazing to be able to hold the space for her. And she's a great example that we can heal and we can get through this together.
Thank you so much for that, Paola and Gabby and Shaloma. This has been very helpful for everybody. I just want to share then the resources that Michelle and I have available for everybody, and then we're just going to give everybody an opportunity to kind of sign off, any closing remarks, and how we can get in touch with you ladies. So let me share my screen real quick. Alrighty, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here's some of the resources that we want to share. We have over here the National Search for Crime Victim Compensation. Sometimes victims, they don't want to, you know, go the legal way because they feel that they cannot afford it. So this is some of the financial resources for assistance or compensation for any medical therapy services or attorney fees or any expenses that you have due to what happened to you. This is resources that can help you financially. It's called the National Search for Crime Victim Compensation. And again, we'll send you all of this. And the other resource that we want to share is the Department of Justice National Resources, that this is for resources and organizations who can connect you with you locally. So there's local help for most people as well. So we'll be sharing that. That way you can find everything locally. And that's pretty much it that we have over here for the resources. And let's start then with you, Gabby. Any closing remarks and how can we reach you?
So first, thank you so much for inviting me today to be here. I really do appreciate it. It's wonderful to have spaces where people can open up and talk about their experiences, because we all learn from other people's experiences at the end of the day, and that's the best way to understand different topics, and especially difficult topics like this one. So if anybody is wanting to contact me, so my office is in Coral Gables, which is basically in the middle of Miami. I see clients online, I see clients in office, so they have both options. And it's really easy to find me. Either just Google my website, bluepearltherapeutic.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is also Blue Pearl Therapeutic. You can even Google my name and you will find me. So Gabriela Galvan de Antion, and you will find me there, and that's the easiest way to find me.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you guys again, both Betsy and Michelle, for all the work and the coordination you guys did leading up to this event. I want to thank you, Paola and Gabriela, because I personally learned a lot. I shared more than I expected to, and I think that's because you guys created such a welcoming and warm environment. So as I said, I'm the founder of Women of Color in Cannabis. If you'd like to follow us or just learn more about what we do, you can email us at woke.world, or you can find us at Instagram at _WOCC. And we are having part 2 of our sexual harassment event called Me Too and Marijuana on the last Saturday of April. So we encourage you guys, if you're interested in cannabis or not, even if it's legal in your state, this is a fight that you want to be involved in, just to make sure that anyone who does enter the industry isn't preyed upon. And like, I hope everyone learned a lot and feels loved and lifted and supported and heard, because I definitely do. And I enjoy like the rest of your Saturday.
So yes, ladies, thank you so much. I think I feel so grateful to be able to sit with some of the stories that you shared today. And I think, this was aimed for men, for women, but we didn't get to this. But I think also partners that are out there that are watching this event because they've had a loved one experience this type of assault or trauma, when you're listening to your partner, all you need to do for them is to be present. I think a lot of the times we want to ask those questions. Well, where were you? Why were you there so late? And that's just to alleviate the tension that we feel. The other word that's coming to mind is triggers. A lot of the times people may not know all their triggers. So even picking a reset word like bananas, which means I need you to give me a glass of water, I need you to give me a hug, or I just need you to like stare into my eyes and tell me that I'm okay, right? So that, we can process this. So I just want to say that, for the people out there that maybe haven't experienced them themselves, but want to support somebody that has. And you guys, I'm just passionate about what I do. And I'm so grateful for you, Betsy and Michelle. I met Betsy a while back in not such a great group practice, but life just brings you together, and that's a lovely thing. So I'm just, thank you so much for thinking of me. You can find me in my website, Life Discovery Psychotherapy. I post videos on Instagram because I am huge on sex education. We need more of it, and good sex education. So my Instagram is Life Discovery Psych, PSYCH. And yes, my practice is in Blue Lagoon. And thank you again. And everybody have a wonderful Saturday.
Awesome. Thank you so much. But we do have just one question in the audience that maybe we do have a chance to answer. We have over here what it says is, are there any resources for women getting out of an abusive relationship? I work with low-income population, and one of the biggest barriers for women leaving the abuser is not having a safe place to go. Shelters usually have a wait list, and for this woman, that is not an option. So is there any resources that you guys can offer?
Can they share where she's located?
And
In Florida. Okay, I gotta shut up then. I'm in New York.
So that is not my area of expertise. However, they could probably call without a problem, because I've called for, various times for clients who have asked if they call Women in Distress. So it is a specialized shelter for women who are trying to leave abusive relationship, and they do have a whole protocol on how to go about safely leaving a relationship in those circumstances, regardless if they have children or not. And there's no fees or anything like that. So it can be someone who has bajillions of dollars and someone who has like no money. Does not matter. Yes, many shelters do have wait lists and things like that. However, Women in Distress has such a great network that they, regardless of where they may be in Florida or whatnot, they can connect you to a shelter or an organization that can exist that does not have a wait list. So I always recommend, call, Women in Distress, and they can help link you to the right resources, because it can be challenging.
Yeah, you guys, I don't have, let me look. I know there's an agency in Miami, but I just can't think the name of it. But I was thinking the same one, Women in Distress, to be able to get some resources. But let me give it some thought. I know that there's another agency here. I met this person a really long time ago, but what I'll do is, Betsy, maybe I can send you the information and you can put it on that list.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, ladies, for giving some of your time this Saturday on this heavy topic. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm really honored to be sharing the stage with every single one of you, and everybody that's in the audience. Thank you so much for attending. Make sure you spread the word, because it really starts with collectively. Each one of us in here have to do our part in order to create change. Everybody has a role in this world, and we can all make the world a better place. So we'll be sharing everything with everybody here in the email tomorrow. Anything else that you want to add on, Michelle?
No, I'm just really happy that all of the panelists gave us so much to talk about. We actually had a lot more questions to discuss, but we did run out of time, so I'm happy about that, because it just shows that we gave you guys a lot of different resources and a lot of different information to take with you. Another thing that I want to mention is that the video is going to be recorded and added to the Eventbrite link. So please do your part and just share it with your friends and family so that they can watch it and also learn what we learned today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Saturday. Enjoy.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.